Everyone already knows who Hitler was. That part isn't up for debate. What's less talked about, and honestly a lot more unsettling, is how he actually decided what mattered. We're not talking morality, culture, or human dignity. To him, respect came down to one thing, and that's power. Not just having it, but being able to impose it at scale. We're talking land, industry, freight networks, guns, and logistics. The ability to dominate reality and reshape it. And if you couldn't do that, you really didn't count. And if you strip away the moral horror for just a second and just look at that logic, something uncomfortable starts to come into focus. Because what you're left with isn't just a historical figure. This is really not even about Hitler. It's about how power actually gets measured in the real world. And once you see that, it becomes hard to unsee. And what keeps standing out to me is how narrow his definition of respect really was. Not respect in the moral sense, not admiration or even dignity. Something much more specific. To him, respect meant one thing. Can you impose yourself on reality at scale? That was it. He didn't care about individual brilliance, he didn't care about culture, and he didn't care about ancient history, unless it translated into present-day force. The only question that mattered were practical. Do you control land and do you control industry? Do you control logistics and have the ability to dominate other states? If the answer was no, or unsure, then in his mind, you did not exist. It's a warped worldview, but it was internally consistent. And that didn't come from nowhere. It came from experience. From living in a world where ideas collapse the moment that they fail to become force. And this is where it stops being about Hitler alone. Because once you understand the rule he was operating from, you start noticing versions of it far beyond Nazi Germany. And once you look through that lens, a lot of things seem contradictory. It starts to make more sense. And you see this pattern especially clearly when you look at how he viewed non-European societies. For example, ancient African civilizations. History always showed that complex societies existed across Africa long before modern Europe. Take Timbuktu, the Mali Empire, and etc. But to Hitler, that didn't matter. And this isn't one of those societies lacking values. It's about how his definition of power filtered what he considered real. Because past greatness without present power meant nothing. Archaeology wasn't threatening. It was armies, guns, railways, and factories. If a civilization no longer controlled territory or industry in the present day, it didn't register as relevant. And it also explains something else, why European unity never really mattered to him. Nazi ideology talked about race constantly, but politically, he thought in terms of hierarchy, not unity. The knife never stopped moving. Nations were ranked, absorbed, subordinated, or simply discarded, depending on whether they strengthened Germany. Stability wasn't the goal because stability created competitors. And that same logic showed up everywhere in that system. Whenever something contradicted the hierarchy, it had to be explained away. If non-European societies built something advanced, it was borrowed or accidental. If black excellence appeared, it was reframed as physical, non-intellectual, culture without sovereignty. It was dismissed as pride without power and treated simply like folklore. Even when sovereignty did exist, it was treated like an exception, not a challenge. And we can take Ethiopia as a great example. When Mussolini invaded in the 1930s, Ethiopia resisted. And that resistance impressed people around the world. But it didn't change Hitler's worldview. At one point, he even supported Haile Selassie, one of the leaders of Ethiopia. This was in a limited way, and it was not out of respect, but because it complicated Italian ambitions. it was ultimately strategy, not recognition. And you see the same pattern with movements like Marcus Garvey's movement. He was one of the largest black nationalists in history. Millions of people it reached. Newspaper, shipping ventures, organizations, discipline, and pride. But through a lens like Hitler's, that still wouldn't count. There's simply no sovereign state. No independent army, industrial base, nothing that could project force at a geopolitical level. So even something massive like that would get reduced to symbolism, not threat. And when you think about it, that's unsettling, because it shows how narrow the gate really was for being taken seriously at all. And what makes this darker is that his own life seemed to confirm it. Again, Hitler, again and again. He survived World War I, attempted a coup, he fails, but isn't destroyed. He goes to prison and uses that time to write, builds out his platform, he gets out early and gains citizenship at the right moment. He rides the economic collapse into political legitimacy, gets appointed chancellor, then consolidates power. Crisis after crisis. None of that was guaranteed, but it was all aligned from his perspective. And from his perspective, all of this looked like confirmation. Not moral confirmation, but practical confirmation. Reality. And it kept rewarding force. And here's the part that people overlook. He didn't build the system already existed. Germany was already industrial. Rail networks, factories, universities, bureaucracies, everything was in place. He didn't build the machine, he pointed it. And once that system aligned, ideas turned into movements very quickly. Because the infrastructure was already there. Wars aren't won by belief. They're won by logistics. Railways move armies, factories produce weapons, freight sustains campaigns, and that's why early German expansion looked unstoppable. Not because ideology had power, but because ideology was connected to a system that could convert resources into force. And that explains also something else. Why Africa wasn't central to his strategy. Hitler wanted to conquer the world ultimately. He started with Europe. But Africa required naval power, long supply chains. Ocean routes, Europe didn't. It was a connected landmass. Railways, industry feeding directly into the war. Territory could be absorbed without crossing oceans. So in his mind, respect wasn't personal, it was infrastructural. Who can stop me? Who can choke my supply? And who can end this? Everything else was just noise. And this is why people misunderstand history sometimes. They could ask, could someone else become another Hitler? But that's not really the right question. Because history isn't just about individuals. It's about alignment, relentlessness, meeting institutional weakness, timing, and meeting existing machinery. And if you remove one piece, the chain breaks. You leave everything in place, and something catastrophic is possible. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. Because once you see that pattern, you start seeing it everywhere. States, business, media, and the modern obsession with scale, reach, leverage, and force. People say they respect values or talent or culture, and sometimes they do, but again and again what actually gets taken seriously is the ability to turn intention into reality. The moral horror is specific to Hitler, but the logic of power did not end with him.